Hey everybody, welcome to today's live Q&A. I'm here with Jami King. Welcome, Jami.
Yay.
And Jami is going to be walking us through everything and anything about Etsy. And I know that this is kind of a hot topic in the group sometimes, whether or not to sell on Etsy. And so it's going to be a really great conversation. And I'm super excited to hear from you, Jami.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. So thank you guys for having me. I hope that you are excited about learning a little bit about Etsy, or at least curious. So, because I've got a lot of info for you today.
So if you're tuning in live, just say hello in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And hopefully we can say hi back. We've got a couple waves so far. But just right off the bat, Jami, if you want to kind of give us a rundown of who you are, what you do, where you come from, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to. So if you guys don't know me yet, and I imagine most of you don't, my name is Jami King. I am from Virginia in the US, and I started out as a handmade seller myself in 2016. So I'm a mom of two boys. One is a toddler and one is a preteen. They're a handful, but love them. And a golden doodle puppy, so life is very chaotic in the King household. I am a huge marketing nerd, and I just love to share the tested strategies that I've learned from my own handmade business, what's helped me grow. And just a little backstory on me and my own Etsy shop. I started on Etsy in April of 2016, and I had a goal to go full-time with it. And I was able to make that happen within 8 months. I replaced my corporate salary and was making over $5,000 a month. And by November of that same year, I made over $12,000 that month. So I know you've probably heard a lot of horror stories about Etsy, but trust me when I say the sky's the limit. And so I'm going to share some info about why you want to be on Etsy, how to get started, and how to improve your sales today. So I'm really excited.
What were you selling?
I sold painted wood signs, and so they very much have a hand-lettered look, but I just used a font. So I absolutely love scripty, pretty fonts, and I am a hobby hand letterer myself. I was telling Becca before we got started, I often don't practice because my two kids, if I pull out my Tombow markers or my iPad, they want to play with the markers, play with the iPad, or they will lose them. My iPad pencil is missing at this very moment. So it's somewhere in my house. I just don't know where. So I can relate to a lot of you guys who really want to get going with hand lettering, but maybe don't practice quite as much as you should.
But that being said, there's totally a market for things that are hand lettered or look hand lettered clearly.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's so many pretty fonts out there that I would not let, the point you're at right now stop you from getting started, even if you feel like maybe your hand lettering's not there. Because that's how I was. I loved the look. I just didn't quite yet have the talent yet. So I used stencils and I painted on wood signs, and it was really successful for me because I know people love that look. My signs were very rustic looking, but also very pretty and feminine with the crisp white scripty font. So people are definitely into that style for sure.
So how long ago did you say that was?
That was April of 2016. So gosh, like 2.5 years ago.
I wonder now if, I've noticed a huge uptick in people who are interested in hand lettering and all the handmade, hand lettered font stuff. I just wonder if, and I know that this is part of the controversial topic that we're going to talk about, but if the competition is way bigger on Etsy now than it was, and I know that a lot of people think that that's kind of a deterrent to going on Etsy, or there are so many people on there that you feel like you have to lower your price to compete. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to. So there are a lot of horror stories out there about Etsy for sure. One of them being that it's too competitive. And I'll agree, it is super competitive. There are over 50 million active listings on Etsy as of this year. And there's probably more by now since I've gotten that stat. And just as a comparison, in 2016, when I got started, there were 35 million. So it's definitely grown a ton in all niches. Everybody's like, oh, my niche is so oversaturated. So true. But the thing you want to remember is that Etsy's customer base is growing as well. As of 2017, they had over 47 million visitors per month. And that number just keeps growing and growing, and you'll find it even grows higher in the fourth quarter of the year where we're at now as people start to really do their holiday shopping. So myth number one is that it's too competitive, so I shouldn't get started. I think that's a complete myth because it is competitive, but because there are so many shoppers on Etsy, you still have the opportunity to see a lot of sales. You may have to get a little more creative and find specific niches for you, but you'll still be able to see sales. For instance,
it's kind of like in business when you're trying to learn online marketing and stuff, they tell you that if you have competition, it's actually a really good thing. It means there's a market for what you're selling. So I think it's you could kind of just got to turn that thinking on its head and think of it the other way. And also remember that although there are a lot of people shopping on Etsy for handmade signs, there are still so many people who don't even realize that that's a thing. Like if you tell somebody that you meet, a stranger, they say, "What do you do?" And you're like, "Oh, I do hand lettered signs." They're like, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
Or like, "I do calligraphy," and they're like, "The calligraphy what?" So, I think you just have to kind of shift your thinking on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Etsy recently did nationwide, I believe it was just in the US. I could be wrong, but I believe it was in the US, nationwide commercials here in the US when they did that crafty show a couple weeks back. I cannot remember what it's called. But so they're actually marketing and they're trying to grow their customer base, which is something they haven't really done in the past. They spend a ton of money on Facebook and Instagram ads. So they are pushing people to Etsy. And so that's an awesome thing. For sure. So another myth I wanted to touch on is that everyone on Etsy undercharges, they undercut each other, they're selling, stuff at a price point that's not profitable. So if I come on there and sell my things at a correct price that's profitable for me, I'm not going to get any sales. And that's a complete myth too. And there's a reason for that is because it's something called perceived value. So when we're shopping, we want a good deal, but we also want to buy something we think is going to be worth spending our money on. And so if you go on Etsy and you find a wood sign and it's $7, and then you find a wood sign that's similar, that's maybe $25, you're going to really wonder, well, what's wrong with that $7 one? Why is it so cheap? And so many people on Etsy are looking for quality. They're looking to support businesses that they feel like they know, like, and trust. Businesses that have taken the time to put a professional look out there. And so you're going to find that people on Etsy, shoppers on Etsy, just like anywhere, they're buying at all price points. And so I always tell people, price where you're profitable. Don't price where you feel like you should be. Because if you're not profitable, it's an expensive hobby. So I definitely think that that's a horror story that everybody's like, oh, I can't be on Etsy because I'd have to price my items so cheap. You do not have to do anything. Price your items where you feel like it's going to be worth it for you. You may find you're getting less sales, but at least the selling that you're doing, you're actually turning a profit. That's, for me, most important. Profits are, the most important thing for any business, I think.
Yeah, and wouldn't you prefer to only have to make one item at $14 than two items at $7? Like, why are people trying to get so much volume when they could just be selling less items for a higher price point to the people who appreciate it? And that doesn't just go for Etsy, that goes for everything.
Yeah, and I see Sarah in the comments, the show. Kelsey said the show's called Making It. Yes, that is it. I knew it was something short, that show that Etsy put their commercials in. Yeah. And Sarah said, pricing is a huge issue for me. And to me, pricing is one of those things that you can't dwell on. Like, you've just kind of got to put your stuff out there at the prices that are comfortable for you. And you can't be looking at what other people are doing. You just have to put the very best version of your thing out there. For sure. All right. So do you want me to just kind of dive in to a little bit about what Etsy is and why people want to sell there? Because I feel like we've kind of covered those two main things that may be stopping people from selling there. So I hope you guys feel a little more confident about it. But I want to talk to you.
I think those are the main showstoppers for people. So we got those out of the way, and now we could just kind of dive right in.
Awesome. I'm gonna start telling you guys that may not be familiar about Etsy what it is. So it's a global marketplace of handmade items, vintage items, and craft supplies is what it is. It's a website where you can set up shop online. and just start selling your handmade items. Like I was saying a minute ago, there's over 50 million active products on there with over 47 million visitors per month. So the cool thing about getting started with Etsy is that it has a pre-built audience for you. And why would you want to sell there? That's a question I get all the time. Like, maybe you have heard those horror stories, or maybe you just don't know anything about it. So the main reason that I say sell on Etsy is because you have nothing to lose other than a little bit of time. And that's just because there are some fees when you list an item. It's 20 cents an item. That's the only thing that you pay up front. So every different product you put on there would be 20 cents. But if you know a fellow Etsy seller, you can get a link for 40 free listings, and that's what I recommend doing. And then that's $8 worth of listings, and then you're good to go there. So if you guys want to get the link to get started, ask each other, like just ask, in the Happy Ever Crafter group. And I know there's got to be some Etsy sellers that'll share their link. You can have mine if you want, but I'd rather you guys support each other. So that's basically the biggest thing is you've got nothing to lose. You don't even have money to lose, just a little bit of time. The other reason that you want to sell on Etsy is that it makes it very easy to start selling worldwide. You can get your shop set up within a day. If you started your own website, or even if you started your own Facebook page or wherever else you might want to sell, you're not going to be able to tap into a global marketplace right away like you would on Etsy. So for me, just the ability to be in front of such a large worldwide audience is huge. The next reason you'd want to sell on Etsy is it's very user-friendly. So to get started, honestly, they have tons of guides, like helpful little tool tips to walk you through setting up your shop and creating your listings. We have a lot of, members, and I have a membership community for handmade sellers called the Handmade Journey Academy. A lot of our members are not tech savvy, but they're able to get going with Etsy relatively easy. It's definitely easier than setting up your own website with, say, Shopify or something. And when I say user-friendly, a lot of people are like, no, it's not. There's this thing called SEO. SEO is not user-friendly. I'll agree with you there, but even that can be fairly easy to learn, and it's not something that you need to dive in to get started.
Jami, can you just touch on what SEO is real quick? Because someone had already asked that in the comments as well.
Perfect. I'm going to actually touch on SEO here in just a second. I'm going to talk about the pillars of a great Etsy shop, and SEO is one of those pillars. So I'm going to make sure that I cover that, because that's definitely, like, most people are like, SEO, what is that? So I'm definitely going to cover that. Yeah, because I think that's a great topic. The last reason that I have, actually I have two more. So 2 more reasons why you want to sell on Etsy. I mentioned a minute ago, you've got that ready-made audience. So if you've never tried to sell online, you have to have an audience to sell. Like, if you have to have people to talk to. And if you have a Facebook page, maybe you're realizing nobody's seeing your posts. If you are on Instagram, maybe you're seeing the same thing. You post and maybe 2 people comment, and one of them is your mom and your best friend. So starting out is really tough if you don't have an audience to sell to. And that's one of the main reasons you want to get on Etsy, is because you have that ready-made audience of people looking to buy handmade items. So for me, that's kind of a no-brainer, is you need an audience. Etsy has one for you. And then the last one, it's a great jumping off point. So a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to give Etsy the extra fees. I've heard it's expensive to sell on Etsy. You don't have to be on Etsy forever. Etsy can be a place to start your online sales. And then while you're on Etsy, you can focus on growing your social media following. You can focus on growing an email list. And then you've got that audience to sell to. And you may not need Etsy going forward. You may be able to either sell through social media or a standalone website without Etsy. So I hope that's a kind of a path that everyone wants to follow, is that maybe in the future you won't need Etsy, but it's such a great jumping off point for sure. Such a great place to get started, because you don't have to focus solely on growing that audience. You can focus on taking good photos and SEO, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and just making great products. So that audience growth is either going to take you a lot of time and money. So Etsy kind of does that for you.
And I think that's a really good point. And just for people who are listening that might not kind of have put those pieces together yet, if you think about people like Laura Hooper or Ash Bush, who sells all of her handmade point and pen holders. They both started with Etsy shops as well. And then their audiences grew and they were able to start selling on their own websites too. So if you're concerned, so if you're concerned about needing your own website right off the bat or not having a big enough audience to sell to, that's definitely a really good point to think about.
For sure. You don't need to be on Etsy forever. Now, it may not be a bad idea to keep your Etsy around, to kind of keep growing your email list and to get in front of new people, but you can definitely phase out of Etsy where maybe you just have a couple listings on there. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure path, but I think Etsy is a great place to start out because it takes away a lot of that overwhelm of creating your own audience. All right, so that's why I hope all of you will consider Etsy. I think it's a great place to start. Like I said, I've been very successful there. I would not have been able to start my own handmade business had it not been for Etsy because I worked full time when I got started and I believe my son at that time was 2. And so I had my hands full. I had an 1.5-hour commute every day. And if it hadn't been for Etsy and giving me that kind of path to follow to get my items online, I probably honestly would never have gotten started. So I hope all of you will consider it now and at least give it a shot. All right, so now I'm going to speak to the pillars of a great Etsy shop. So what you need to get started and what you need to improve if you're already on Etsy. So to me, there are a couple things that are going to be really important. The first is getting found on Etsy. And so the main way that you get found on Etsy to get your listing seen is through SEO. And I know SEO is a confusing topic, so I'm going to kind of dive into this just for a minute. If you want more information, I've got a lot of info over on my blog at handmadejourney.com. But SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. And SEO basically is the work that you do to get found in the Etsy search results. So most shoppers, when they go to Etsy, they are looking for listings by typing a phrase into the search box. So maybe you're looking for a chair cushion for your dining room table, and you go to Etsy and you type in chair cushion. If you have worked on your SEO for your listings that are chair cushions and you have that phrase, chair cushion, in there, then you have a chance of appearing for that search phrase. Now, where you appear, like how high up, that can get really tricky. But that's just the basics of how it works. And when you're trying to get found on Etsy, you definitely want to invest the time in SEO. I think this is the trickiest topic for people, and it's the topic that I focus on the most. I just did an Etsy SEO masterclass last week because Etsy made some changes to their SEO. So I wanted to kind of bring everybody up to speed on that. So if you want more info on that, you can definitely check out my website. But SEO, again, super important to getting found. The next way that you can get found is that you can share your shop outside of Etsy. So I always tell people that you want to market your business on social media, and what I recommend is picking one social media platform to focus on. A lot of people, they try and get on Pinterest, Facebook, Instagram, an email list all at one time, and then they're not doing any of them very well. So what I recommend is pick one social media platform, really get to know that platform, what works for you there, and make sure that you are sharing your product and your business there. You want to focus on connecting with your customers. So for you guys that do hand lettering, like videos of you doing your hand lettering, I could watch those all day. I don't know about you, but I love those hyperlapse videos where people are doing their hand lettering. So there's lots of ways to share your business and your art on social media. That can be a great way outside of Etsy to bring people into your listings. And then another way to get found is Etsy does offer ad space inside of Etsy. You pay a little bit extra for it, and that can help get your listings found as well. They're called Etsy promoted listings. I absolutely recommend those for sure. So that's how you get found on Etsy, which is kind of that first pillar. Because if you can't get found, then nobody is going to see your stuff and you're not going to make any sales. So getting found is definitely super important.
So Jami, where did you say was the best place for people to go if they want to learn more about SEO and all that stuff?
Yes, that's true. I got so excited I skipped over that. There are 2 websites that I highly recommend if you're struggling with SEO, and one of those is going to be marmalade.com, and the other is going to be erank.org. Those two websites, they're tools to help you find keywords that are going to fit your listings. They also kind of help you figure out the format for your SEO. They are definitely both invaluable tools, and eRank has a free version that is really well, so it works really well. It has a lot of good tools in it. They also have a paid version, and then Marmalade, I believe you can sign up for a 1-week trial, I want to say. But it can be really valuable tool too. So I would definitely check out both of those.
And so right when you're just getting started and you say this is somebody's first time even hearing the term SEO, before you get into using those tools and stuff, are there any good places to just learn more about it and what they should and shouldn't be doing? And maybe your website is one of those main resources?
Yes, absolutely. So over at handmadejourney.com, I have a lot of articles about SEO. If you click on start here at the top of my blog, it breaks all the articles down by sections. There are at least 5 articles all devoted to SEO. There's one that is Etsy SEO basics. Then there's one that explains why it's so complicated, because that's the question I get a lot. Why in the heck does it have to be so complicated? And just how to format your titles, your tags, all that good stuff. There's also at the bottom of each of those posts, there's an Etsy SEO checklist that may help you if you're already on Etsy and you're struggling to figure out SEO.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and Krista said eRank is asking for a password. You do have to create an account because it links directly with both Marmalade and eRank, link directly with your Etsy shop, and so they're going to pull all the data in from your shop to help you give you a lot of stats and direction as you're working with them. So you do have to create an account. Let's see. I was just checking out. Sarah said, the thing with Etsy audiences, the struggle is people don't find your stuff because they have to scroll through a lot of pages. And so that's where Etsy SEO really comes into play, for sure. Getting found is by putting proper SEO in place. And the thing to remember about people shopping online, like if I'm looking for that chair cushion I mentioned earlier, I may start out by typing a very broad, vague phrase like chair cushion, where there may be a ton of listings. But as I'm shopping and looking through Etsy, I'm going to start narrowing down what I'm looking for. So maybe as I'm shopping, I realize, oh, I want a round chair cushion. And so then I change my phrase to round chair cushion. Well, then there's going to be less listings for that because it's more specific. Then as I'm looking at these round chair cushions, I'm like, oh, I want a blue round chair cushion. And so maybe I type that in. And then as I'm looking, I know I want like damask fabric. And so I'm typing blue damask round chair cushion. It sounds a little unbelievable, but this is how I shop. As I get closer to making a purchase and have a better idea of what I'm looking for, I'm starting to type in longer phrases to really see just what I'm looking for. And so those specific phrases are what you want in your SEO. And those are the phrases that help lead to sales because you're competing with less products and the people are more likely to buy. So that was a little more in depth than I had planned on going, but hopefully that makes sense on how you can get found on Etsy with a little bit of research into SEO. Okay, cool. All right, so getting found, very important for sure. The next area that you want to focus on is you want to get clicks. So once people find your listings and they see it in the search results, you want them to click and take a closer look. The way to do that is you want an amazing first photo. The first photo is just, it cannot be understated how important taking that first photo was. I know product photography is tough. I used to be a wedding and portrait photographer, and even I still really struggle with product photography. I know you've had some people in the past come talk to you guys about photography. I know my good friend Amy Eaton talked to you guys recently about flat lays, so I'm not going to talk about photography, but just know that it is super important with Etsy or wherever you're selling online. Definitely invest time into good photos for sure. And then the next way to get clicks is those relevant keywords. So when you're working on your SEO, you're putting keywords in your titles and in other places inside your listing. You want to make sure you're putting keywords that actually describe your item because you want to appear in the right search results. If you are selling, like a painted wood sign that you've done calligraphy on, for instance, you would not want to put like something completely, I'm trying to think of something irrelevant now.
Chair cushion.
Yeah, chair cushion, for instance. You wouldn't want to put that in there. Or even something that's a little bit of a stretch, because people aren't going to buy it if that's not what they're looking for. So getting people to click over to your listings is super important. And then from there, the last pillar I want to talk about is getting sales. And I think this info applies to wherever you're selling, but especially to Etsy. To get a sale, you need people to feel confident in what they're purchasing. And so you want to make sure you have all the info that they need to make that decision inside your descriptions. So you want to tell people the size of the item, how you made it. You want to tell people where they can use it, who it would be a good gift for, the kind of shipping you use. All that info should be in your descriptions so that people feel very confident that this is the right item for them. You also want to have reasonable shipping prices. That's a big one Etsy's been talking about lately. I know in the past, some people on Etsy, they're like, oh, I can't price my item as high as I want to, so I'll just charge higher shipping. You don't want to do that. It's a turnoff for people. So you want to keep your shipping as reasonable as you can while still being profitable. And reasonable processing times. I know a lot of you guys, you may be kind of in two camps with your hand lettering items. You may be making each item, making it to order, or making items in advance to sell. Or you may be kind of mass producing your items. You make it once and then maybe you're printing it, like maybe you're making prints of your original work, or you're actually putting your artwork on something else like a t-shirt. So however you're doing it, you want to keep your processing time, how long it takes you to send that product out, as reasonable as possible. And does that sound right, that people are kind of in both of those lanes with? Yeah. Okay, cool.
I wanted to just kind of dig a little deeper on the shipping topic. So what's the best practice to figure out what your shipping costs should be? Like, do you actually make a product, bring it to the post office, see how much it would cost to ship somewhere?
That's a great question. So what you want to do is you want to get a rough idea of how much your item weighs. And I think if you plan on doing any kind of shipping, you probably want to invest in a scale so that you can weigh your items at home, and that way you don't have to. I mean, you could definitely run to the post office and they'll be glad to give you an estimate. But for me, it's easy, especially if I'm making a lot of different types of things, just to have a little scale. You can even use like a kitchen food scale. A lot of people have those, or they're like $5 to $10 at Walmart. But yeah, get a scale so you can get an idea of how much your item weighs. And then I like this website. It's called the Postal Calc, and it's just the USPS website if you're in the US. And I would imagine hopefully most countries have one. Let's see. I was trying to figure out what it is. It's postcalc.ups.com. So postcalc.usps.com. And you can put in the item size, like the weight. You can put in a rough box estimate. If you don't have boxes or envelopes yet, just put in something that's slightly bigger than your item. And then what I do is I figure out like the furthest I'm going to ship, and I put a zip code for that in. So for me, I'm on the East Coast. I always just put 90210 in because I know that's a zip code in California. It's the only zip code I have memorized other than my own. But that way you can get an idea of like what it's going to cost to ship from here to California. Or you can look and see what it's going to be to ship to somewhere close. If you are in the US or Canada, Etsy has a calculator that they will actually calculate the shipping for you. So all you have to do is put in your product weight and the dimensions of your packaging, and they'll figure out the shipping for you, which is really handy. If you're in other countries, unfortunately, they don't have that, so you would have to figure out what shipping would be and actually manually put that in. But yeah, shipping is definitely kind of a trial and error thing where you want to figure out as much and like use that calculator and figure out in advance, like get a rough idea. But then once you start selling, you'll get an idea as well.
And we had one question submitted beforehand.
We did.
Just trying to find it on here from
Maria.
She's asking suggestions for international artists looking to sell over Etsy. Is that even possible? So kind of half the question is shipping, but half the question is whether or not that's even a possibility.
I will say it depends, because every country has different postal setups, and some are definitely more evolved than others. And like, for instance, if you are in the UK, you probably have, fairly quick shipping times like the US and a variety of other countries in Europe. But, I know Maria mentioned she's in Pakistan. Unfortunately, I don't know anything about the postal system there. And so what I would recommend doing is going down to your local post office and just ask some questions. Like say, hey, if I ship to the US, how long in general would that take? Or if your postal system has a website, like that's a good resource too. I will admit international shipping is scary for a lot of people, especially if you're new, and it's overwhelming. But if you can just find someone that can help you, answer some questions for you, that's what I would do. The other thing is if you can find someone from your country that also is already on Etsy, that's a great thing. There's a filter on Etsy that you can, like if you search for, jewelry, like something very vague, you can actually filter by the country that the sellers are in. And so I would just, if like for Maria, I would find someone else selling in Pakistan and just send them a message on Etsy and just ask some questions. People are generally really helpful, especially if they know you're not a direct competitor. Like we may not want to help somebody that's selling the exact same thing that we do, but people are really helpful. And so I can't provide a lot of info on like what shipping is like, in each individual country, but there are some good resources out there. And I promise as you start doing research and gain that knowledge, it can be a lot less scary, but it's definitely possible. It just depends. Like I have a good friend who is in Ecuador, and she is on Etsy. She cannot ship from Ecuador because it's just way too pricey. Like people would never, like I want to say it's like $40 or higher, and shipping would take potentially months. And it's just because Ecuador doesn't have a postal system in place that's really conducive for international shipping, unfortunately. What she does is she'll either mail a bunch of her products to a friend in the US who then sends out her orders for her, or she will have, she worked in a place that had a lot of tourists coming. She would find a tourist to actually take her products back in their suitcase. She made small things. Back to the US, and then that way, they could then mail them to her friend. And so you can kind of get creative. Unfortunately, most people probably don't have a friend, that would be willing to do that for them, but it's definitely like be creative and just explore all your options. Don't assume it's not possible because where there's a will, there's a way for sure. Okay, that was a really good question because I know international shipping is scary for a lot of people, but as you find out more, it's so doable. All right, and then the last piece I had in that can help you get sales is photos that show a variety of perspectives of your item. And when I say perspectives, the thing with online sales is we cannot pick up an item and hold it in our hand and see it. Like I've got a crystal here. If I see a photo of this online and I just see one photo maybe of the top of it, I may not be likely to buy it because this thing has all kinds of different angles and people may want to see it close up or further back, or they may want to see the scale of it. They may want to see it setting in someone's hand so they can see the size. So when you are listing your products on Etsy, definitely show a variety of angles. Show a close-up photo. Show a photo that does show scale, whether you're holding your item or it's beside an item that people know the size of, like a ruler or something like that. So good photos, cannot say enough about them, but you've really got to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer and understand that people are hesitant to buy online, especially from an Etsy shop that they may not know of yet. And so anything you can do to help them feel more comfortable making that purchase, any kind of different info or perspectives you can provide is going to help for sure. All right, now I was going to check over on the Facebook group because I wanted to make sure. So it looks like Allie said, how do you make sure you're not undercharging for shipping? So definitely doing that research. If you are in the US, they make it easy, like I said, because they're going to calculate the shipping for you. And then just trial and error. Some people on Etsy are now doing free shipping because Etsy's encouraging it. And if you want to make sure you're not undercharging there, that you would just want to really make sure you're doing that research, and you can make your prices higher if needed if you do want to offer discounted or free shipping. So good question. Laurel said, do you charge actual postage or do you add in any handling charges? I used to actually charge a handling charge because it helped me cover like any items I needed to reship because they got lost, I could do that for my customer because I'd been charging a handling charge. But now, actually, there's this thing called an Etsy algorithm. I don't want to get into that too much today because it's such a big topic, but it helps determine where your items rank on Etsy. And they need it just because there are so many items. There's over, like I said, over 50 million active on Etsy right now. And so the algorithm helps determine where, in what order those listings appear. Like if someone searches that chair cushion and there's, 50,000 listings, well, how do they figure out which ones appear on the first page? And then it's from there. So it's the algorithm. One small piece of that is the shipping price. So they are giving items that offer lower shipping a slight boost. So if you sell hand-lettered cards, for instance, most cards are going to be able to be shipped fairly inexpensively. So if you charge $10 for shipping for a card, and most of your competitors are charging $4, that's going to mean that you may rank below a lot of those people that are charging less. So for that reason, I do not charge a handling charge anymore. I would just, if you need to make sure you're profitable, you may want to just raise the price of your item instead. So that was a good question. Okay, cool. I think hopefully I've answered all the questions that have been asked so far. And if you guys have questions for me, definitely drop them in. There's so much that I could talk about when it comes to Etsy. I just know so many of you are not on Etsy yet, so I didn't want to overwhelm you. I do have, for all of you guys that are watching this, I have a predictions guide, a handmade seller predictions guide. And I'll be honest, I created this at the beginning of 2018, and it was a prediction of things that may be coming this year. Well, now we are almost at the end of 2018, so it's going to sound a little less relevant, but I can guarantee you the info in there is still really helpful. So if you want to check out my predictions guide, if you want some more info from me, that'll also get you on my email list so I can keep sending you good tips for selling online. You can definitely grab that, and it is over at handmadejourney.com/2018 predictions. So, and I know, Becca, you have that link, so.
Yep, it's up on the screen now.
Awesome. So, yeah, if you guys want to grab that, definitely do, and that'll give you some more info. Let's see. Okay, Dee asked a good question. Do you have to have a business license to use Etsy? You do not, because business licenses are generally issued by your city or county. That's not something they check for. I do think it would be a good idea, but it's not something you have to have right away. So if you get on Etsy, I would try and get one within like the first couple of weeks for sure. But it's really going to depend on your city or county and whether they want you to have one before you even attempt to sell. So definitely give your local office a call and they can talk to you all about business licenses. Martha asked a very good question, and I want to make sure there were a couple other questions asked in advance too I'm going to touch on, but she said, if you have to summarize the top 5 things to do before joining Etsy, what would that be? And 5 things, that's a lot. I would definitely figure out kind of what niche you want to get started in. You may not know, and when I say niche, the thing to remember on Etsy is Etsy shops are kind of like boutiques. You really want to focus in on, a few areas. You don't want to try and sell everything under the sun. So you want to figure out what you might want to sell. Like that's the biggest one. And at first you can definitely be more broad with that. You could try a little bit of everything. And then as you figure out what sells, you could narrow it down. But yeah, so you figure out what you want to sell and definitely perfect your craft. Like that would be the first thing. Then the second thing is going to be really practice taking photos of your items, because the photos, again, are so very important. And so when you do decide to start listing on Etsy, you do want to try and get as good of a photo on there as possible. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be awesome at first. My first photos on Etsy were absolutely horrible. I took my wooden signs and for some reason I laid them outside in gravel and took the photo, and they looked horrible. So, and I was a photographer and I knew better, still did it. So just remember, you can always improve things as you go, but definitely try and get your photos as good as possible. All right, I'm trying to think off the top of my head what else you might want to do.
I'd probably say pricing. Figure out what
Pricing,
your
yep.
pricing should be.
That's a good one. Again, pricing is something you can adjust as you go. You can even start out a little bit lower if you want, just to kind of gain some momentum. But you definitely want to be profitable, especially as you get going, because you don't want it to be an expensive hobby. You want to be able to make, some money on what you're doing so that you're not just working and not getting anywhere. So yeah, pricing is a great one to research. The shipping would be a great thing to research. You have an idea, go ahead and, figure out where you would want to, what kind of packaging you'd want to use. For small flat things, bubble envelopes, bubble mailers work really good. I have one right here, actually. Just trying not to. So I get these on Amazon. They're very inexpensive. You can buy them in sets of like 25. I kind of have switched gears with my own handmade business. I make macrame earrings and macrame wall stuff now. So I use a lot of these bubble mailers. Amazon Prime is a great place to get bubble mailers and boxes. I started out trying to buy them on like box websites like uline.com, but I realized the shipping was so high that often Amazon Prime beat their prices by far. So just research that. What is that? 4 things? I can't think of a fifth thing off the top of my head, but hopefully some of the other things that I've said. So if you want to watch the replay, that may give you some, some other info about what you might want to work on before you get going on Etsy. But I do want to just stress that you just want to get going. A lot of people, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I'll admit that in the past, I used to have to feel like I had all my ducks in a row before I got started. And I realized I often never got started because I never had all the things worked out perfectly. And so what I suggest is just jumping in and trying it, because you can improve things as you go, and just letting go of that perfection, because you're never going to get things perfect. There's always going to be something you can improve, but there's time. Like if you looked at my original listings, the photos were crap, the descriptions were crap. I totally underpriced myself. I didn't know what I was doing in shipping, and so my packaging didn't look the best. But I still made sales, and it got me going, and I learned as I went. So do not feel like you can't get started just because you don't have all these things figured out. You can definitely learn as you go, for sure. Everybody's got to start somewhere, and if you wait for that perfection, you'll never get started.
And it sounds like when you were getting started, you didn't have a resource like your website to help you come up with all these answers. There wasn't as much info out there. And actually, I started my first Etsy shop back in 2003, I want to say, when my youngest son was like a year old, and I had taken off work to be with him for his first couple months. And I was like, hey, I'll start an Etsy shop. There were no resources back in 2003. And so I had no clue what I was doing. I got in way over my head. I got overwhelmed, and I quit within just a few weeks. I put my stuff on there, and I just expected, like Field of Dreams, everybody would just show up and come by. But unfortunately, they didn't. And I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. So I quit. And so when I started my shop 2 years ago, I realized, okay, there are people doing well on Etsy. If they're doing well, I can figure it out. And so I just got started, and I dove into research, and there was some info out there, and I just kept experimenting and trying things, and I figured out what worked. And that first year I was doing so well, I was like, this info is too good not to share. And so that's when I started my blog, just to help other handmade sellers. And I have a free Facebook group that you guys are all welcome to join. There's a link over at Handmade Journey. And now that's what I focus on, is helping handmade sellers. So I hope that you guys will take the time to do a little research and just give it a shot, because it's definitely can be so worth it. Yeah, it really sounds like you kind of have to take the people who are saying all the negative things about Etsy with a grain of salt, because they probably haven't done a ton of research and figured out what works yet. And I think a lot of people just think if they have a really good product and they put it on Etsy, it'll magically sell. But there are all these other factors you have to come up with and you have to think about. And Jami's website has answers to a lot of those. So I've got it up on the screen right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I figure if anybody has other questions, you're now in our Facebook group, so I'm sure you'll be a valuable resource to us as well.
Oh, for sure. I'll have to watch out for Etsy posts for sure. The that is very true about what you were saying about taking all the horror stories with a grain of salt, because there are so many people that start a business and don't put in a lot of effort and they don't see results. But for me, anything worth doing is going to take effort. So it's like just like learning calligraphy or hand lettering, you have to put in the practice. And that's the same with Etsy. You have to try it and you just have to dive in and you have to learn. You have to be committed to it or it's not going to work. So I know that a lot of you guys are already committed if you are planning on opening a business with your calligraphy. So I hope that you will commit to learning new things and keeping an open mind, because the possibilities are there. I have many people in the Handmade Journey Academy that are selling full-time on Etsy. Like that's their full-time income. And several people, like that's their entire family's full-time income, which it was for me. My husband worked in my handmade business with me before I really got going helping other sellers. Like we ran our shop and it provided a full-time income for a family of 4. So much is possible.
Jami, can you just talk a little bit about your programs and how you teach other people and stuff like that before we hop off?
Yeah, I would love to. So handmadejourney.com is my website, like, up on the screen. That is what I started with, and it's got a ton of like blog posts and info, some freebies on there. There's an SEO guide, a SEO checklist. So that's definitely where you can learn a lot from me. And then I have a free Facebook group that's also linked up at the top of that website. And there's over 17,000 people in the group now. So that can be a great place for you to talk with other sellers. I sometimes will do like Facebook Lives, kind of like this one, where I do free trainings in the group. And then I do have a learning community for handmade sellers called the Handmade Journey Academy. And that is my pride and joy, because that's where I can really help handmade sellers and actually make a big difference in their business. I offer support, encouragement, and all kinds of training in there. And it is a monthly paid membership, and we have over 500 members. It's an awesome community because everybody is so passionate about growing their handmade businesses, and they're so supportive of each other. So if you sign up for my predictions guide, I'll send you some information about the academy and give you guys a chance to join if you're interested. But yeah, I would love it if you guys checked out my website. And, if you have questions after this, I'm going to kind of keep an eye on this post so I can see if anybody does have any other questions, but you can also reach out to me through the website. And
awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jami. This was really helpful.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, and so like you said, I'm sure there'll be some more questions coming up on here, and this will go up on YouTube after as well, and I'm sure that people will have comments and questions. I think people found it really helpful just from the comments I'm seeing already. So thanks again so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It has been awesome. And I apologize for drinking water like crazy. I got a cold this week. But
didn't we all?
My goal was to make it through without losing my voice and not coughing all over you guys, so it was a success.
Nailed it.
All right. Thank you so much, Becca and everybody.
Thank you for being here, and I will talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.